An Occult Hunter's Deathlog, Part 1, written by TheForestHasEyes. We all thought it was a joke at the mission briefing. This was back in the mid-80s. Many of us were group veterans from tours in Indochina and assisting the Mujah in Afghanistan. However, when the FBI liaison showed us the slides, some of us were sick to our stomach and none of us could believe it. All across Minnesota, homesteads and cabins were ransacked and torn apart by what was officially just non-connected encounters with bears and wolves. However, unofficially, the culprit were ape men that were nearly 8 feet tall and weighed 1,000 pounds. We all thought that it was just myths. Bigfoot sightings were becoming more and more frequent. But to us, we were about as grounded as you could get with all of our training and time on the line. That was until he showed us those that were killed. Men, women, young and old, even children. Gnawed on, torn apart, mutilated. Something about that made my blood run cold. These weren't myths. They were real, living things that were in our backyards and were killing indiscriminately. From there on, we all knew what we had to do. We just didn't know what kind of hell we were walking into. What I do know is that sightings of cryptids have become less frequent and more bathed in skepticism. But I also know that the amount of people disappearing has quadrupled. We are fighting a war, and we are losing. That's an excerpt from an anonymous source within the United States Special Operations community. The truth of what he says has been talked about in speculation. However, I've learned firsthand that it was a premonition of what this generation's warfighter's next opponent was going to be. It's no secret that we live in a very strange world. Places like the Appalachian Mountains have been around as long as Pangea. The Western Plains are filled with things that are taboo just to speak about, let alone go looking for. The forests of Europe are filled with tales of demons that stretch back to shadow men attacking and killing Roman soldiers. The deserts of Africa consume the fiercest foes and leave nothing but scraps of their uniform and black strings as omens. There's a reason that no matter the distance, every single culture has their own interpretation of the devil, of dragons and shapeshifters, that all rhyme and seem far too similar. Honestly, it's amazing that our species has made it as far as we have. However, whatever is happening is far from over. Honestly, as technology has advanced, our curiosity has deepened, and we've gone to further and further lengths to peer exactly where we shouldn't. NATO has been fighting a secret war for decades, and their enemies aren't human. So you're probably wondering, hey, if this is so secret, why are we just hearing about it? And how are you able to talk about it? Well, put simply, I'm in an interesting situation. And you don't have to, well, my name is Dwight Nolan. You won't find much looking for me, as I've been scrubbed from the larger part of the internet and the world. There are only a few scraps left behind. I was in the United States Army for 10 or so years, before I took to security contracting. It's there that I was a security guard who was hired to protect an estate. But things went south, very south. then north for a bit, then went lateral. It's complicated, but that was years ago. Now, well, I got out of the army for several specific reasons. 4 tours to Afghanistan had left its wear and tear on my mind. One of the perks of being part of the most deployed unit in the United States 10th Mountain Division, climb to glory and all of that garbage. I wanted to get back to the normal world and live a normal life. Normal. What an effing fool I was. Turns out, this world is 9 miles from anarchy and 2 feet from the abyss, and those who control everything pay a pretty dime for men like I was to man the wall and keep the monsters at bay. Here I was thinking that it was metaphorical. There's a reason that explorers wrote, "Here be dragons," in hopes to ward off anyone from venturing where many of their friends hadn't returned from. However, the indomitable human spirit is coupled with the unstoppable human curiosity that has resulted in 100,000 people going missing every single year. Where do I factor into all of this? Well, shortly after my southern Missouri hell ride, I got an offer from a suit named Xavier. I still don't know if that's his real name or an alibi, and I don't really care. And I definitely didn't back then. You know what's the hard part about this world? Making a difference takes blood, sweat, and tears. And it seems futile if the elite are working against you. After I got a termination letter, a fat check, and got told to go and make myself scarce or find myself disappeared, I did. And I felt like a coward. I moved out west for a while. I laid low, but no matter how much I tried, no amount of denial or alcohol could smother the conflict that I had internally. So, after 2 years, I decided to accept the offer that Xavier made me just over a year later. A pit in my stomach formed as I knew that I was casting myself into the same rabbit hole that few ever got a chance to crawl out of, but, well, let's just say that I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I didn't. So, I've been gone for, well, quite a few years. It's been a roller coaster, but it's been productive. That being said, coming to terms with everything hasn't been the easiest, and I need some way to process everything. So, I made a request that was surprisingly accepted, to catalog everything that's been happening. Why was it greenlit? Your guess is as good as mine. Maybe they want to make sure that whatever is leaked is in line with what they want. Or maybe they don't think that anyone will believe it anyways. Maybe Xavier realizes that sooner or later I was gonna end up whistleblowing anyways, so he wanted to ensure that I was sanctioned. It's a better look. Either way, here we are. And boy, have I got a lot to say. But it's best if we start at the beginning, for me at least. The group I work for is called PEXU, Paranormal Extermination Unit. I know, very clever. You'll find it listed on no public documents, no government websites or dossiers. But it's a very real multinational organization with a serious amount of funding. A wise man once said, "Designation means authorization." PEXU has a lot of units behind it. Some you may have heard of. The 4th Special Forces Group based out of Fort Bragg. They were the first to be inducted and assigned, and they have laid a lot of the groundwork for what was to come. We've got my old friend Nicholas Walker to thank for that. There's been other instances too. A group of Danish frogmen went dark in the marshes not too long ago. The Polish Grom have been on the front line of this brutal war, and the only thing holding it back in Europe. There's been other occurrences, with the 22nd SAS having gotten into something particularly hairy. Though I'll let the Brits tell that tale. They'll never shut up if I don't. There's also a SEAL team that had to go dark recently. Team 4. Hopefully they'll be back. That being said, not everything can or should be handled by the wholesale special operations units. Sometimes there's a threat occurring that can be handled by less personnel. And right now, we're strapped and our big guns are always getting sent out. We can't always be bringing a machine gun to a fistfight. I mean, I would, but... well, anyways. Solo missions are a common occurrence as there are a lot of single PEX-U operators. Usually, people who can travel, have jurisdiction over a large area, or can conduct them without making ripples. But they are always those that have dealt with an incredible amount of crap in the darkness and come out the last one standing. If you hunt monsters, there's a good chance that you're going to end up in a trap one day, surrounded. So, if you get sent, you better be able to get yourself out of it, or at least take down as many as you can on your way down. The career of a solo isn't without its kinks, and mine was, well, that's probably a good place to start. The beginning. Dossier, Clown House. I could feel the blood pumping through my veins full force when they sent me the information on my first target package. I had regretted not taking the opportunity from PEX-U for so long. I blamed myself for every missing person and mutilated body that was found 200 yards in forsaken ground. So, when they got back to me and I finally had a chance to jump into things again, I was both fired up and absolutely terrified. Why? Well, let's recount. The last time this happened, I was pushing mid-30s, running through the woods, nearly getting hit by every Midwest monster that popped out of the brush. Despite my pretty stacked resume in helping to defeat that sizable event, one that my direct contact at PEX-U called one of the most extreme outbreaks we've seen in a while. It only takes one. So, as I sat there in my quiet home, my fax machine slowly printing out the pages, I knew there was no going back. My first mission saw me dispatched to southern Ohio, where a suburban town was being attacked by a clown. Yeah, I know, but just trust me on this one. The anomaly was first seen manifesting itself towards the outskirts and less populated areas, seeming to be like a bad rerun of the clown pandemic that occurred a decade or so ago. Except the locals found this creepy, yet funny. It stopped being humorous when they discovered the body of a child in a nearby creek, though. One day, the clown stopped appearing at the edges of the town and started making its way into it. The locals would describe the chime of an ice cream truck, except it was wrong in every way. The only photo available was a half-blurred image taken as someone hid beside the window. The exterior was rusted, the paint dry and warped to all hell as what was probably blue and yellow looked like teal and decay. And the audio of the soundbite, let's just say that I never thought that some BS jingle would give me chills. But here I am. It was described as off-putting, though most people avoided it, until the kid in question managed to sneak out and apparently ran up to the ice cream truck and was never seen again, alive. I remember reading that, sitting there white-knuckling the page. The good and bad about being in this industry is that you're extremely informed, and if your intel can help it, you won't miss a detail. The bad is that you get every detail. The kid's name, Toby. He was around 8 and some change. Police found him under the bridge, face down on a rock bed, with all of his clothing stained. He had been gone for several days, yet his clothes, apart from being soaked, seemed relatively clean, except for when they turned him over. He was drained of blood and hollowed out, clinically so, with a level of precision and brutal efficiency that showed that this wasn't just some deranged maniac. The local police were dispatched in an attempt to hunt it down. A neighborhood watch was put out for the horrifying tune of the truck. And around a week and a half later, someone called in. One of the pages was the transcript of the call.
Yes, 911. What is your emergency?
Hello, this is from 226. I'm calling about the truck with that serial killer. He's right down the block outside.
Okay, understood, ma'am. Can I have your location?
Yes, he's on the intersection of and heading east. He's moving. Couldn't be about more than 5 miles an hour.
All right, ma'am. I've got police on their way. Stay inside and keep out of sight.
Someone just knocked on my door.
Local police units arrived, attempting to stop it minutes after the truck stopped in the middle of the road. However, people in nearby houses could only hear screams followed by over 3 dozen gunshots. When more backup showed up, people sheepishly emerged from under their beds. The truck was gone, and 2 smashed, blood-covered, and empty police cars were left behind. The police then ordered a stand down, and while civil servants stood down, houses started turning up empty. People got vengeful. All who acted on such vengeance went missing. It then eventually trickled down to us, to me. As you can imagine, I stopped chuckling at the notion of this thing being a killer clown, right after it decided to be a child murderer and a cop killer. I had some hints of what to bring in terms of my kit from people in the industry. The Hunters Guild recommended me to bring a standard allotment of salt, silver, iron, and some holy water. Others recommended that I bring different EpiPens full of antitoxins and nerve agents, the same kind that I had to keep in the army to protect me from chemical attacks, ones which filled me with all kinds of warm and fuzzies. And of course, I would carry my own loadout, which of course was one of the benefits of being on the payroll of a coalition that could get you pretty much whatever you proved that you needed. I rolled into town on a rainy-ass day. The vehicle provided was a gray SUV with full blacked-out windows and enough armor in the doors and engine to make every turn hydroplane, and every acceleration sluggish. But it was comfort knowing that if whatever this thing was got the jump on me, I would, hopefully, be okay within the first few moments. The blacked-out windows kept everything in the vehicle nice and concealed, which helped because I rolled out a full kit. A plate carrier sporting magazines, first aid, and all other sorts of accessories that they could give me. On my hip was a Glock 19X, and on my passenger seat was a Mark 18. Its .556 rifle, much like the AR-15 or M4, but with a shorter barrel at 10.3 inches. It might not be everyone's choice, but Eugene Stoner has saved my ass more times than I can count. The plan was simple, although probably stupid. I was going to head to the area where most of the sightings occurred and wait there. If or when the truck showed up, I would assess what it did and maneuver. If not, it would be time to go trudging through the woods. I hoped for the former because the latter was going to be a painful trip down memory lane. So I slow-rolled and crept the rainy streets in my state-sponsored mine-resistant spook car, keeping a watch as I headed towards a nice, silent road towards the southeastern area of the town, hugging the dense woods. I cracked open a Red Bull and waited for 10 minutes, which turned into 2 hours and 10 minutes before I even realized. My hands white-knuckling the steering wheel. I was frustrated. My first hit, and I don't even know how to actually find the thing. Here I was, camping off to the side of the road on the government's dime. A pit in my stomach formed as I debated with myself what to do. Then I heard it. The jingle. Like someone was trying to sing while they were being cut into by steak knives and doused in salt. It came from behind, causing me to look through the tinted windows, and there I saw it. The mouth of the truck looked like a horrifying gaping maw as it slowly crept down the empty street. I took one last gulp of my caffeine courage as I reached over and grabbed my rifle. The truck slowly moved as I slid my Pelter headset over my ears and turned on my Inbitter radio.
Maine, this is November 1. I've got Op 4 actual in my sights. Approximately 30 meters to my rear and closing. Holding position inside of my vehicle, over.
On the other end, the calm voice of a man back at our Tactical Operations Center came through, albeit a bit choppy as the dense rain was having its way with our communications, trying to travel over multiple states.
Copy, November. Maintain.
I muttered to myself and shook my head. Then I froze as the thing passed right by me. I swear, just looking at it gave me a migraine, and not because it looked like a hunk of rusted trash. It rolled down the road like a predator, stalking its territory which now ran through the town, before pulling off. Maybe it was pure luck, or the tinted windows that it didn't notice me. Or maybe it did and it wanted me to. But I ended up following it. My gut told me to stay put and wait for backup. Then I quickly reminded myself that there was no backup. I was these people's saving grace. No one else, just me. I put the car into drive and trailed the thing around 200 yards behind it, my rifle between my legs just in case it stopped, in which case I would have to engage in the same circumstance that the poor lady on the 911 call had. But it didn't. The drive was long as I had to match its pace, which was slower than even my vehicle wanted to go. And through the mini monsoon, I followed it until it trailed off into a backroads path. Thank God for whoever gave me this vehicle for including 4-wheel drive and tires with all the traction. The mud-soaked roads were lined with gravel that barely helped any. The road started to bend and the truck went out of view, leaving me with only the bending tree lines and a forest that I swear was watching me. Eventually, I came to the top of a hill and stopped. Down a path that was flanked on both sides by tall trees, The forest opened up to an overgrown area of ferns and tall grass, where a decrepit shack stood amongst the stone and other rubble. From the top of the hill, I inspected it with a magnifier mounted just behind my EOTech sight. I had two avenues of approach: straight down the road or creeping through the woods. I was vastly better armed than a small-town cop. However, 4 of them, including several armed locals, were dispatched with ease. I had to be smart. So, against my better judgment, I put on my dark green Gore-Tex jacket underneath my plate carrier and stepped out into the pouring rain. Through my radio, I could hear command trying to contact me, but it was all static and broken up. So, against my better judgment, I turned the volume down. I left the headset on. If nothing else, it would protect my ears from a hail of gunfire. I approached the steep decline into the hill going down into the woods, carefully grabbing onto the trees to avoid falling. Right before a branch that I thought was sturdy betrayed me and snapped, causing me to stumble, slam into a tree, fall, and land hard. I could hear the forest now. Welcome back, Dwight. Regardless, I kept moving, my eyes checking the surrounding trees as I inspected the canvas of grass, browns, and blues. If it was a clown, it would stick right out, hopefully. But I wasn't taking any chances. Every footstep was methodical. Every glance was purposeful. I could feel myself getting soaked, but it didn't matter. I was slowly gaining ground as I saw the shack come into view. A trait that you never expect to pick up in the military is smell. Is there a fire nearby? Is the belt of the Humvee burnt and about to snap? Is that water or gasoline? And is there an enemy combatant nearby? One thing that I picked up in Afghanistan is that almost all of the time your enemy did not shower. There were many instances in which we could smell the putrid stink off their bodies before we even saw them, warning us that the next corner may or may not have a true believer behind it. As I approached the house, I smelt not just death, but rot. The kind of smell that a body gives off when it's day 5 of defending a COP in the mountains, and there's a fallen combatant halfway down that's been baking in the sun, but you can't go move him, so you have to sit there and endure it while getting shot at. Had I not the iron stomach of a man so desensitized by it for years, I would have gagged. Instead, I approached the shack. I realized that this was the place. I quickly descended upon the truck, approaching the back door. I whipped it open and saw no one was there. Then I got a huge blast of putrid stink. Inside, the floor and walls were lined with blood, and what I had to theorize was fecal matter. Glyphs and drawings, incoherent, were scribbled in the brown and black substance all over the cabinet, floor, and fridges of the ice cream truck. Assessing that no one was inside, I made for the structure. Brown wood and rusted metal lined the shack, a complete mess. The front door had long since caved in, and for a moment, I was unsure of how to get inside. That is, until I spotted an old stairwell leading down. Since the top of the structure was a hollow mess, I realized this must be where my prey had gone. My wet boots carefully stepped, trying to make as little noise as possible as I headed into the dimly lit cellar ahead. The smell got worse, and even as my eyes started to water from it, I pushed through. A strange warmth could be felt, only adding to my frustration as the humidity of the rain from the summer day outside was making me as irritated as all hell. Despite this, my rifle was raised as I pied past a corner that led to the left and followed the amber lights of candles. Through my pelters, I could hear the crunching of bone and the tearing of flesh. I turned the corner to see it. It was a clown. At least it was trying to look like one. The thing had a blue mane outfit with white and red sleeves. It was standing on all fours. Its legs seemed to bend the wrong way, appearing much like an insect or a thing, as its body actively crunched and contorted as it stood over some other body. I looked around. Human skin hung flayed from the walls and ceiling. The skin was of all ages, of all races, sexes, horrifying caricatures of smiles, of makeup. Other glyphs and writing had been carved into the skin or painted on. All of them were mouth agape. This was probably their last moments, screaming. They were all screaming. My heart was pounding out of my chest as my eyes snapped back to the thing. Its hands crept over the body. Black and rotten bone seemed to protrude and break through the skin as it adapted, and it consumed the body whole, peeling the skin off as it consumed the flesh and left only the skin and bones. Then, it stopped. Its head spun up and around at an impossible angle and stretched, its jaws biting down as the horrifying pile of tendons and muscle that was once a human dropped to the ground. Its eyes were milky white, with pinprick irises. We both stared at each other. Honestly, I think that it might have been a little shocked to see me. That would last about a millisecond as it unhinged its jaw to reveal several rows of intersecting teeth and jaw mandibles within. The monster roared with the screams of all of its victims. In that moment, muzzle raised, toe-to-toe with this killer of men, I vividly remember the only thing that I could think to say. Holy frick. The thing sprung up and leapt, its enormous body somehow moving like that of a grasshopper in speed. I had to dive out of the way to the left. It slammed face first into the concrete basement wall, and I could hear the thud and crunch of the impact. I took aim and fired. My short-barreled muzzle sending shockwaves bouncing off the walls, deafening whoever might hear. And I think even as it howled, 556 was sent into its center of mass. But the thing just turned and leapt at me. I kept distance, firing round after round as I put the stone pillars and columns between me and it. However, like some sort of giant centipede, it coiled past, mouth wide as it lunged for me. "Get bent!" I shouted, whipping the thing with the buttstock, snapping its head back into the pillar as I scrambled away. My weapon ran dry and I quickly swapped in a new magazine, the bolt going cha-chink to let me know that she was ready. The creature was pouring blood by this point. A disgusting yellow sludge poured out onto the floor as it howled at me, and then proceeded to run. While it did, it seemed to retract, to condense. It took off in its enlarged, elongated, broken joint form. And when it got to the stairs, it looked like a feral man-clown running on all fours. I took off after it, but it was fast. Between all of the dance hijinks keeping it away from me in the basement, I was breathing heavy as I ran up the stairs. Then I slipped a bit, banging my knee. I can also wholeheartedly endorse that my $50-something knee pad inserts did not help. Regardless, catching sight of it taking off due west into the woods, I sprinted after it. I took aim, firing shot after shot. Flashes of yellow and howls could be heard, letting me know that I was getting rounds on target. It sprinted up a slight hill. My feet were dragging in the mud, and I was getting winded by this point. By the time I reached the top, all I could hear was shuffling, and howls and giggles, the laughter and whispers. I looked around, scanning with my rifle. Where did it go? I muttered. The sound of the massive snapping branches followed by a million-toothed clown jumping right for me from my right caused me to stagger back straight into a tree. Mother of... is all that I managed to get out as the back plate of my plate carrier hit a tree, cranking my neck painfully, and causing the upper branches of the tree to shake, sending a hail of water upon me. I fired off more rounds at the fleeing form as it vanished into the brush. Then my rifle ran dry again. I loaded a new mag as it rounded another tree and prepared to make another pass. There was a clink. The sound of my rifle jamming from the rain as it tried to load the round caused my heart to launch into my throat. I looked down. It was the worst possible double feed, and no amount of fumbling would clear it in time. I glanced up to see that the thing was maybe 15 meters away. I transitioned to my Glock 19, sighting in the red dot on the thing and firing off shot after shot. It took dang near every round head on to the face. I leapt out of the way as it slammed right into the old oak tree. Then I spun around, firing into the thing as it writhed. My shots tearing chunks out of its arms, legs, and back. The clown suit was now little more than scraps on a yellow, putrid, decaying body. It slumped down and rolled over to look at me. By this time, I slammed my handgun back into its Kydex holster. In a matter of seconds, my adrenaline allowed me to clear the magazine, clear the chamber, and successfully load a new round. I aimed my EOTech dot right on the thing. Its massive jaw seemed to be giving away as the clown frills began to melt. Its eyes were a dark black and blue, falling apart as the left side of its head was actively in several pieces. The thing paused, and a mound of yellow sludge and digested remains spilled onto the ground in front of it. I didn't waver. I don't know why I didn't just finish it off. Maybe for the same reason that a boxer hesitates for a moment after a slugfest, watching their opponent struggle in the corner. The thing then spoke. Its voice was high-pitched, several voices together blending in as it stared at me, growling before saying, "I just wanted..." I didn't give it the chance as I flicked my weapon to full auto and laid into it, every round making contact with what I hoped was a brainstem in its almost humanoid neck and head. I painted the tree yellow, black, and red. As the thing slumped over, it was now little more than a pile of... was an anomaly. I caught my breath. It then twitched, and I fired off several more rounds, almost half a magazine in total. I let my rifle hang as I stood there. I had done it. I topped off my Glock 19, pure instinct compelling me to never take my eyes off it as I turned the volume back up on my emitter and tried again. This time I got a slightly okay connection.
Maine, this is November 1. Radio check.
November 1, this is Maine. I read you, Lima Charlie. Requesting sitrep.
Maine, Op 4 Actual is down. I say again, Op 4 Actual is down. Prepare for proof of Echo X-ray.
Echo X-ray meaning exterminated. Mounted to the front of my plate carrier was a phone explicitly used for communication. Team coordination through markers and maps, and in this case, snapping a photo and sending it back to TOC. Within seconds, Maine responded.
Roger, November 1. Keep your ATAK on. Local liaisons en route to secure the area.
I got a week or so to detox from that mission, and it brought back some old memories. I remember the feeling of post-adrenaline after my first firefight. Sitting on the gun in the mountains, the cold wind seemed even harsher after my blood's heat dropped. Sitting out on the porch of my house, overlooking the wide open plains with the Rockies in the distance as my hand calmed, I felt the same clarity that I felt then. Personally, in what I thought was gonna be the twilight years of my career, I had gotten a plot of land, and my house was smack dab in the middle of an area around several hundred miles of nothing. For the year prior to my joining Pexu, it was my place of exile. After the week that I had, it would be my oasis for the next several years. Dossier Situation Whiskey. It was around 0500, also known to non-military, non-Europeans, non-Pacific as 5 a.m. Known to me as early as hell in the morning. Despite this, I got a call from my contact at Pexu, Montgomery. He's like mid-20ish, full-blooded English judging from the accent. This also probably makes sense as to why he decided to wake me up at the crack of dawn.
Good morning, Nolan. I've got an urgent assignment I need you for.
Monty said. I rubbed my eyes, looking at the clock, muttering, "Can't it wait a few hours?"
It's going to take you a few hours to get there, Nolan.
He laughed and quipped,
You're also the only one close. We've got a situation whiskey we need you to take care of.
Whiskey. That caused me to sit up, now much more awake. You're talking about...
You'll see in your target package.
I gazed at the fax machine as it slowly printed out every letter of data as I sipped on my Red Bull. The burning of my brain being deprived of sleep. A familiar reminder of the COF at 000, weapons draw at 1300, step off at 2000. Once it completed transferring, I digested all of it. A recent massacre occurred at a park in northern Minnesota that had every responding agency on high alert. In the aftermath of a particularly bad flash storm, the state police reported that a family of 4 had gone missing after being caught out in remote land. After conducting a search, they found them, or what was left of them.
Images attached.
Montgomery said on the speakerphone as I flipped through.
Just be advised that they're detailed.
They were. You know what I learned most about animals? Whenever they kill, they do it for necessity, survival, hunger. When something is torn apart, it's done out of rage, out of spite. Animals don't have that in them, not truly. When a family of 4, including their 2 children, are found in multiple pieces all over the land, an area of 3 square kilometers, well, you know that it's not a coincidence. So, what separates this from some serial killer? Was it one of the hermits or forest people lurking in the rogue air caves with a SOG hatchet? Well, it was the fact that 2 of the state troopers sent out to look for them ended up in body bags. The troop they were a part of were ordered to stand down. That doesn't happen. When cops lose one of their own, they light a torch and it means war. When law enforcement pulls back, it knows that they're up against something that's out of their league. So what was it? And how was I supposed to match it?
All points and evidence, including this being on Algonquin territory, point to this being a situation whiskey.
Now, for those of you that don't know, the Americas are an ancient place with their own set of rules, their own gods, and their own devils that just so happen to be taking up real estate with us. It just so happens that you can accidentally invoke them if you speak their names. As such, PEXU enforces a series of codes to avoid such ripples. But since this is a story, and you have probably, maybe, already deduced what it is, well, a situation whiskey stands for a Wendigo. What do we know about them? Truly. Well, they're apex predators. And there's a reason even the Hunters Guild spanning many different reservations and game warden detachments don't dance with them. If they don't have to, they won't. They're incredibly fast, lethal to the point of being a weapon of mass destruction. And if you hear them, well, they already know that you're there.
Usually we send out multiples, but we're on all points alert right now. I'm sorry, Nolan, but you're going to have to do this on your own. Keep comms. I'll be right there with you.
Ah, yes. Let's send the newly hired cryptid hitman. Have him tangoing with the Native American cannibal demon. One that's just gutted an armored police cruiser not 18 hours prior. Someone either had it out for me or had extreme confidence in me. Both were impossible to differentiate. I pulled up to the site in the middle of the day. The entire interstate road cutting through uninhabited Minnesota near it was closed off due to storm damage. I knew better, and upon breaching the perimeter, I immediately felt like I was being watched. I knew I was. I found where the state police had gotten attacked at, and my blood ran cold. One of their SUVs was completely gutted from the right side, and the other had its front door torn off and strewn over the road. I grabbed my rifle, this time settling for an AK platform. The higher-powered 7.62 would do wonders more than the AR would against a foe that could shrug off, well, from the amount of brass that I counted on the ground, nearly 210 rounds of 5.56 and too much 9mm. I stepped out and heard nothing. It was the middle of summer, in an area which had more birds and trees than it did people, and it sounded exactly like the peaks of Peshawar did. Regardless, I continued on. I stayed off the trail, calming my footsteps as I followed a trail of blood. The state police hadn't gone down without a fight, and the gutted trees, the brass, and the blood showed it. Still, no sound meant that it was in my area, and the burning sensation on my neck told me that it was watching me. This thing had taken out 2 armed state lawmen, and I was supposed to stop it? I needed to stop it. I was losing my nerve. Though, to be fair, I lost my mind by agreeing to this in the first place. I stopped at the bottom of the trail. There was a large ditch where I found one of them, or what was left. Half of the trooper remained. Their light tan uniform was stained both red with blood and black. There's an emphasis on half, as only one of their arms was visible and their legs were nowhere to be found. I had to stop and pause for a moment. The gore and the sight of them still gripping their rifle in the stiffness of rigor mortis, well, it almost made me lose it. The distant sound of a scream spurred me to life.
MSP, make yourself known!
The distorted sound of a female sounded off throughout the woods in the distance. At first, I turned, raising an eyebrow. Then, a pit formed in my stomach.
MSP, make yourself known!
Same inflection, same tone, same voice. I looked back to the trooper, my black mechanic's glove gripping the half-mutilated skull as I flipped it over. Female. Crap. I could hear the distant sound of branches snapping, breaking. Something was heading at me like a cruise missile, and my fight or flight was activated. I had requisitioned something just for this. I dropped my assault pack, quickly pulling it out. A small green rectangle. I shoved its spokes into the grass and dirt near the trooper, saying a prayer of forgiveness as I placed a blasting cap connected to a wire into it. And I untangled it as I quickly dove behind a nearby berm. I barely had time to collect myself as I saw it emerge. It was... I don't know what I expected. Not the tall, lanky, gaunt, almost skeletal form that ripped a part of a great oak tree out as it approached. Its eyes were sunken to the point of being black pits. Its teeth were jagged, mangled, corroded from disease and decay. Its spine nearly poked through the skin. In some areas, it did. The Wendigo emerged, sniffing the air and looking straight towards me. Through the brush and branches, we locked eyes. It took off towards me, and it didn't even seem to see me assess the trap that I had laid for it. As it neared, only 3 meters from it now, coming well into range as it was just about to run over it. The claymore. I clicked 3 times on the detonator, the pucker factor setting in as I saw it move fast enough to cause light streaks. The blast of the C4 charge within the claymore was enough to riddle the ground, the logs. It half gutted my berm and destroyed anything and everything around it. The 700 ball bearings exploded out like a wave of deadly gray mist, shredding everything from branches, trees, saplings. Everything was erased as the entire forest was cleared. In an instant, its dead skin wrapped tight around its skeleton was torn up, shredded in some areas as its shoulders, torso, and hips were riddled. The beast dropped onto its back as I rose from cover, taking aim with my AK, my red dot centered on it as I fired. I watched 762 tear through its back, ripping off parts of its exposed spine as it messily took off, its roar shaking my organs and nearly making me nauseous. I took off after it, the entire time feeling like I was marching into one more trap, but I had to keep up the pressure. The body of the deformed state trooper, her mangled face. That was someone's daughter, someone's wife. I was not going to join her, and no more were going to be taken like her. Effective fire from 570 meters, over logs, trees, through a ditch that made me feel like I was fighting in supernatural trench warfare. Eventually, I found its lair. The black blood burned into the ground, hissing as my low-cut Solomon boots stepped around. The light of my weapon led the way as I found it. Deep inside of the cave, it rested, hissing and screaming as it roared. I leveled my rifle and took aim again, my controlled shots riddling its skull. It moved to attack again, then it finally collapsed, and I finally let out one long exhale as I doubled over, the exhaustion nearly making me vomit as my tack light bounced around. And then I noticed something. Runes on the floor that looked Eastern European and ancient. They lined the ground and the walls too. I scanned around. I had barely noticed the interior of the cave as I pursued it. There were benches, a table, and where we stood, I had killed it on some sort of an altar. What the? I muttered as I looked. The rotten smell caused me to gag as I scanned my light and noticed a slew of rotten flesh. Meat. Human meat. Most recently, the body of the other state trooper. It had fled here. This was its lair. Someone fed this thing human flesh. Something had manufactured this Wendigo. My hand shakily rose to my push-to-talk as I contacted Montgomery.
Maine, this is November 1. Echo X-ray. The situation is complicated.
I said with my eyes centered on a crudely drawn deer's head on the center of the altar. Later, back at my house, I received not another target package, but a notice from the PEXU higher-ups. There was a theory that some had that the increase in cryptid, anomalous, of paranormal activity, that the lethal encounters of the unearthly kind weren't by coincidence, but by design. Conspiratorial and underground movements predate the wheel and fire when it comes to humanity. And to some, well, they don't believe the world belongs to us, and that unholy elements are eating away at the membrane of society, that is the true natural order of the world. Very Wiccan, extremely genocidal. One of the images of them given was a blurry photo of a person in a white robe, stained with blood, raising a gore-covered knife in the air as they wore an all too lifelike deer mask.